Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unboxed. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Davis. Today is our virtual book club, and we're coming to the end of studying Season with Grace. So stick around as we dig into this wonderful subject. I'm Dr. Robert Davis, family life educator and relationship coach. And welcome to Unboxed, a frank and straightforward conversation about relationships. We're going to talk about family, church, workplace, and all other types of relationships. Join me for the next few moments as we unbox the power and potential of relationships and help you to live your best life. Hey everyone, welcome back again to Unboxed. Tonight is Wednesday. It is our virtual book club night. We're so glad to have you with us. We are studying the book, and this is our final night of studying the book, Season with Grace, God's Recipe for Healthy Family Communication. As I shared with you before, you can pick up your copy at Amazon, both the hard copy and the digital copy. You can also pick up a copy at Google Books as well as Apple Books. And I'm encouraged. Look, do me a favor before we get started. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. Yes, like, subscribe, and share. And if you're following us on YouTube, please click on to the alerts button so that we can let you know when new things are coming out and you can go ahead and follow. For several weeks now, we have been leading an executive directors support group, and I'm going to share a very quick clip with you about the executive director support group, and we're going to be starting up our next round shortly. Let me give you some information about how you can do that. Roll that beautiful footage.
Community leadership can be hard, lonely, and stressful. So if you're an executive director, you're not alone. Unboxed offers a dynamic peer support group where executive directors can share their hopes, questions, fears, and expertise in a safe, confidential space. For more information about our executive directors support group, email us or visit our Unboxed website.
All right, awesome. Make sure that you check that out and learn more. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get jumping into this. I'm glad to have with me today my sister Mitchie, and my wife Denise is in New York visiting our grandchildren. She said that she's going to try to get on, but I can tell you this much: if the choice is between spending time with the grands and spending time with me, I'm gonna come up shout every single time. I'm not gonna come up short. I'm gonna come up shout every single time. So we're glad to have. You know what? As soon as I said that, look who enters into the queue. Dr. Denise Davis is here. I'm so glad to have you here with me, baby. I didn't think you were going to leave the grands for me.
So what did you say about me behind my back?
No, I just said if you had a choice between me and the grands, that I was going to come up shout every single time.
Yeah, they're in bed now, and I'm helping around doing some other tasks, but they're in bed.
All right. Well, I'm so glad that you're here with us. We're on chapter 8 of the book, and we have really had a very healthy discussion throughout the entire book. We've looked at how the African American family was formed and what God's original plan for the family was. We've looked at how communication improves the family. We've looked at several different subjects and topics. And today we're going to jump right into chapter 8, which is entitled Jesus Christ, Our Example. And the reason that this chapter is so important is because it shows us the communication style of Jesus. And then it also helps us to improve our own communication by observing him. And for those of you who don't know, he is the perfect example in every aspect of healthy human functioning. He is the perfect example of maturity, the perfect example of how one communicates, how one deals with stress, anxiety, and relates to others. And so we're going to be looking at how Jesus communicated so that we can began to build up our own communication. But before I jump into that, I want to welcome our guest today. Mitchie, so glad to have you, as well as Denise, glad to have you as well. How are y'all doing today? How has your week been going so far?
And Samantha. Denise?
Oh, we have Samantha with us. All right. That's my daughter, my oldest daughter, Samantha. who has 3 beautiful daughters of her own. Thank you so much for joining
Hey,
with us today
Dad.
as well, Samantha. All right, how's y'all's week been going? Denise, Samantha, Mitchie, how's your week been going along so far?
This is Elise talking right now.
I have both my daughters on the line with me. Oh boy! So my daughter Elise is here. It's a family, like Chuck Brown would say. It's
Hi,
a
everyone.
family affair.
And this is Mitchie.
And my sister. I got wife, sister, and daughters. So y'all know that I have to walk very carefully because they know where all the bodies are buried and they know where all the skeletons are. So I'm gonna be very cautious as I proceed today. Let's go ahead and jump right into this then. In the book, Seasoned with Grace, God's Recipe, another shameless plug, God's Recipe for Healthy Family Communication. It talks about Jesus's communication with his Father. And in the book, it specifically highlights that the communication with the Father was open and often. They had open communication and frequent communication. So those 2 O's, open and often. And this was not only discussed in this chapter about Jesus, but it was something that was discussed in other chapters and in other sections of the book as well. And I want to start off by asking, why do you believe open and often, or open and frequent family communication was such a part of Jesus's life? And why do you believe that it is so important, so vitally important, to be a part of creating a healthy family communication climate within our own lives? So why did Jesus and his Father use open and often communication? And why is it so important for us to do it to increase our families? And I got women on the phone and on the call with us today, and not a call, but with us today. And they say that women use more words than men. So the often part might be easy for y'all to grasp. And now I'm going to take my foot out of my mouth.
That's a really good question. I'm going to let Mom go ahead and answer first for this one while I think.
Okay, I'm glad that you're leading the show. That's my baby girl, Elise, and she's directing the show and tells who speaks first. I'm glad to see that. Go ahead, Denise. Since you've been delegated.
Often. That's not abnormal. But to be in constant communication with someone is to be on the same page. Remember that Christ says that me and my Father are one. I in him and him in me. Basically means that you're in constant communication. You can speak on behalf of the other person. You know their mind. You know them intimately. You know the moves that they'll make. But at the same time, it's a constant pursuit to be on the same page. That's my short answer.
So the often part of communication is very important to create that oneness, that unified oneness. Is that what I'm understanding you say, Denise?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So then what I would take away from this is that families who are seeking to be more united need to spend more time communicating with each other.
That's right. Because as human beings, we do things that we don't like, things that we like. Like they say in education, it's called grow and glow, right? We all have grows and we all have glows. And in order to, when we communicate and we tell about each other's grows, we're helping other people become better and we're becoming better. And when we talk about our glows, we're encouraging that person along and we're providing support for them to go beyond what they're doing or what they can do.
I love it. Anyone else want to chime in? Samantha, so good to have you. Elise and Mitchie. Anybody else want to chime in?
I walked away, but I'll take it back to her in just a second.
Okay. Mitchie, what are your thoughts about this idea of open and often communication and why Jesus and his Father employed it, and why it's so important for us to use it in our family communication?
I would say a short answer as an example to us, to show us how to communicate with one another in our families. And that's my short answer.
You know, this is something that just jumped into my mind. It's not in the book, but it's something that jumped into my mind. We hear people say that the older generation, they didn't talk with their children as much. because they were working and were so busy trying to do the farms and everything else. And that just wasn't part, that whole, petting and patting and cuddling and, hey, everybody, tell us how you feel and all that stuff. That was just not a part of the culture, across races, but just part of the 18th century, 1800s culture and early 1900s culture. But now in this day and age, we have so many distractions, social media, 500 different TV channels and other things. And families, even though we talk about the importance of communication, we're still not communicating as much. So there still is this wall, whatever is the reason, whether it's the old school wall or it's the current distraction wall, and busyness wall that prevents families from having that often communication that is so vitally important. Denise just said, that Jesus made the statement, my Father and I are one, and he also referenced in other places about always being in contact and connected with the Father. So I'm curious as to why there's just so many distractions when this is such an important. I don't know if that's a question or just an observation. There's so many distractions when this is such a vital part of family communication. I'm interested in hearing some other thoughts around this. And y'all can't stay on mute too long, because one of the worst things for live TV is dead space. So anything that's live streaming or live broadcasting, y'all got to hit that mute button quickly and often and jump right on in.
Denise, go ahead. I'm just like your daughter. You can take this one first, and then I'll chime in.
Thanks a lot. This just hones my quick on my feet skills.
But you're so good at it. You're so good at it.
Oh, what a way to pump me up. But I don't know. I don't know why it's so difficult. I mean, it was difficult in the Garden of Eden. The Father was very clear about what not to do and the consequences. And yet Eve still wandered away from her husband. Her husband still didn't keep an eye or wasn't close to his wife or whatever, how we want to word it. And then when God asked them a specific question, why, they still hemmed and hawed. So I don't know why it's always been so difficult. I think when disobedience came in this world, it just became difficult. When shame entered the world, when sin entered, it just became difficult to connect with each other and to stay connected.
One thing that was about their communication was not just the often part, but the open part as well. And I'm wondering how much of family communication is superficial. In the next book that I'm writing, for those of you who are interested, I'm in the process of writing a book right now called UnBoxed. And I'll be looking at family communication from a clinical perspective. And one aspect of family communication, of course, are the different levels. So, the bottom level, or the area where we do our most frequent amount of communication is just, dealing with facts and information, but it's not on that intimate level. So part of the open communication is really getting to that intimate level. And I've noticed even with, people that I work with, there's a difficulty in developing intimacy in communication. And I'm interested because, Jesus said that he and his Father had not only open communication, but intimate communication. Not only often communication, but intimate communication. And so I'm curious, and I'm wondering your thoughts about the challenges around intimate communication, and even how do we establish that intimate communication?
Well, we know that intimate communication is letting people into our world, into our headspace, into our emotions, making ourselves vulnerable. And once you open that door to someone, they see the window to your soul. And you just can't do that with everyone. So we're all very selective about it. And if we've had experience with broken trust, that's even more difficult.
Yeah. And I think it's sometimes, and I'm interested in hearing other thoughts as well. I think sometimes it is our fear. And my son had me to watch a movie the other day, and they were mocking it, but it's actually true. Kind of like there's two spectrums, love on one end and fear on the other end. And if you really think about it, it kind of does boil down to those two, governing emotions. We call them different things. We call it anxiety. We call it nervousness. But we call it, we do say scared sometimes. We have all these different, my mind just went blank, but we have all these different terminologies. But there is this fear of opening up and exposing ourselves, even to people that we have been in close relationship with for years. That fear of how they're going to view us, see us, think about us, how they're going to respond, the effect that it might have on the family, etc. Anita Hall says, and I'm going to bring what she says up. Anita Hall says, how do you communicate past hurts to a parent that only wants to say, honor your father and mother, and shuts down the conversation or hangs up, no matter how calm you express yourself? I'm literally trying to be in an authentic relationship without all the surface type conversation. Let's go deeper so we can heal and break generational curses for our kids and generations to come. I'm going to leave that up there, and I'm interested in one of you jumping in. I have some things I'd like to say. Thank you for sharing that with us, Anita. I appreciate that. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share relative to the thought that Anita just brought into the conversation?
I would say that just say what you've always said, whether it's to me when giving advice to my job or whatever. Just remain being who you are, and other people will come up to your level rather than changing who you are to go to their level. Just continue being open, continue being a communicator, continue to seek greater levels of intimacy with your family, whether it's in a group or whether it's one-on-one. And it will be reciprocated. It may not happen right away, but it will eventually be reciprocated.
And I'm glad that you brought that out, because one of the things that I've even noticed when I preach is that there are subjects that I will preach about, struggles in my own life, opening up myself and saying, hey, listen, this is something that I'm dealing with in my own life. And you can literally see people getting uncomfortable. And the question is, why are you uncomfortable with me sharing my struggle? But what you don't want to do, and I'm glad you said this, Denise, is you don't want to then go the opposite, which is to pull yourself down and say, well, I'm not going, since the rest of my family is superficial and keeps it surface, I'm going to elevate the conversation rather than begin to function at the level of the least mature. I'm going to set the tempo by being, or attempting to be, the most mature. And as we look at Jesus, and again, I want to bring others in, just unmute yourself and jump right on in. As we look at Jesus, that's one of the things we kind of noticed about his life, is that he did not go down. He got down with the lowest, but he never functioned at the lowest level. Somebody needs to hear this about their family. I'm getting into a preaching mode tonight, but somebody needs to hear this about how they function and interact with their families. Jesus ministered, associated, and was in company with the lowest, what we call the lowest, but he never got down to the lowest level. Even when he interacted with the lowest, he always interacted himself at a very mature level, but in the company of those who were very emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise immature. He always kept his emotional level up. So when he was dealing with hypocrites who were, superficial and surface, he would go deep into what it means to have a true relationship with God. When he dealt with people who, were engaged in vices and who were, menaces to society, those tax collectors were menaces to society. He did not get down to their level, but he stayed where he was, deep, thoughtful, mature, compassionate, considerate. He never changed who he was. That was very profound about Jesus. And I just want to share with each of us, you don't lower your level of maturity, you pull others up to your level. You don't get down on their level. You stay at your level of maturity in order to pull people up. And I'm just gonna say this last thing. And again, I want y'all just to jump in, Mitchie, Denise, jump right in. Because if you think about it, if you stay at your level, for them to communicate and interact with you means that they're going to have to elevate just to be able to have a conversation with you, because now they have to come up to where you are to converse with you. If you're not going to get down on quote unquote their level, they have to elevate to communicate with you. So rather than being guided, a person who is mature does the guiding, not because they try to take over, but just by simple virtue of being who they are. They change the whole tempo of the conversation, the whole tempo and the whole mood. All right, I want to bring others in. I've done a lot of talking. I want to bring others in. Mitchie, Denise, or is this last show going to be the Robert Davis show?
I think you're doing a wonderful job. I think it's the Robert Davis show. The only thing that keeps coming to mind, and I'm hearing everybody's comments, and I don't know why I'm still stuck here, but I'm stuck here because when you said fear, and you said love on one end, did you say love on one end and fear on the other?
Yes.
And the only thing I keep thinking of is, what are we fearful of? And then I started to think, to me, I think I call it free will is scary, because everyone has free will and you never know what their choice will be. And so that opens the door to so much, whether it can lead to something positive, to something negative. And I don't know why that's staying on my mind. So I guess I say all of that to say that ultimately the only person you have control over is you. And so I guess that I'm just speaking on what you just said. Stay where you are in your level of maturity and focus on yourself, because you can't change it. They have free will. You can't.
My sister-in-law is so smart.
She really is. That really opened up my mind to something right then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just like, they have free will. You can't change it. So really your focus is just is bettering self.
Wow. Anita says fear of rejection too. Boy, that is a very profound part. Fear of rejection. As you said that, Mitchie, one of the things that jumped into my mind was that one of the greatest aspects of God's godliness is that he gave his created beings the freedom of choice. That has to be a very scary thing.
Very scary. You don't know what someone else's choice will ever be. You only know your choice. You never know what someone else, and that makes even communication scary. Because if I open myself and make myself vulnerable, I don't know if you're going to choose to make yourself vulnerable as well. That's a risk I'm taking.
Also, you don't know if I'm going to use that information to hurt you.
Right.
Once you expose once you tell me where you are cut,
right,
you don't know. I mean, like a boxer's in the ring. Once he figures out that your eye is cut, he's going to try his best to jab that eye until the referee stops the fight. You don't know if that person is going to use the greatest pain in your life to try to hurt you more. Denise, you're about to say something.
Well, I was thinking also, as Chichi was talking about a marital relationship, you can work on the communication, you can work on making yourself better. And at the end of the day, someone still have a choice as to whether they stay, go, distance, cut off, whatever the case may be. And it leaves you vulnerable, not just that they can use your information, but you're left vulnerable after putting in hard work.
Right.
That's so true. I'm going to move us on because our time, and we just started on first question. Page 98. And I think this is a natural flow from what we're conversing about. Page 98 introduces the idea that as we look at Jesus's communication, it exudes confidence that his Father would hear him. And I'm interested, I think we've already started to touch on it, and that is, how do we let our family members know we are listening to hear them, not just listening to speak? In other words, how do we communicate with our family in a way that helps to build confidence in the relationship and at the same time helps them to build confidence in us?
Can Elise answer that one since she's the teenager in the room? How
Let's
do you
talk about
know?
Unfortunately, I had to step away, and that's why I had to get quiet at the beginning because she's dealing with her 3-year-old cousin at the moment, and that's
it.
a
Uh-oh.
lot going down.
Oh
So
man.
I would love to go get her. Let me see,
No,
Denise.
no,
If
that's
you
okay. That's okay because
okay, okay.
I know Kingston is 3, and if he
Yes,
gets a
yeah,
chance,
it's over. It's over.
yeah.
She's out. She's out.
But you're in it, so go ahead. I want
Go
to hear
ahead.
your
Okay,
thoughts.
repeat that one more time. Of
So
how do
when
we
Jesus
feel
communicated with
confident?
his Father,
Uh-huh.
it exuded confidence. How do
Mhm.
we establish communication with our family that allows them to be confident first in the relationship and then in us? How do we do that? How do we help build that confidence in family communication?
I would say by like listening, truly listening and hearing, not without interruptions,
Mhm.
and reflecting on it and letting the person know what you heard. Like this is what I heard from you, and just really thinking about it, and that just making a person feel heard. That's how I would like to be, or I wish I could. I need to work on that, but to me, that would be a way I would feel heard if somebody just listens and say, you know what, let me think about that and ponder on it, and then come back to me with their ideas or their thoughts.
Something that I used to tell my own biological children when they were young, as well as the kids that I have as clients with social skills. Listening with our eyes, our mind, and our body. Let the person know that you're listening by looking at them as
Right,
they're talking. Let
right,
them know you're listening by focusing on what they're saying. That means you're going to stay on the topic that they're talking about. It means that you're not straying off in your mind about something else that you need to do. And it also with your body, let your body language show that you're listening. Your body is forward, it's turned towards them. Your head is not turned somewhere else. So that's the physical way to me of making sure the person know you're listening. But then I'm not also interrupting, not being defensive, and then just like Mitchie just said at the end, reiterating what you heard them say.
I
And
love.
going beyond that, let me say this. I think that a lot of our habits start with the family. And I think when you learn to be a good communicator in the family, it gives you the confidence to be a good communicator in other areas of life.
And by communication, we're not just talking about public speaking. We're talking about that intimate, open, frequent type of conversation. I want to show real quick. Melanie said, "Listen and don't judge." I really like that that she brings out. Listen and don't judge,
right.
and that can be a very difficult task. The not judge part,
Very, very.
because if you're like me, or like just about any other of the 8 billion people on this planet, you have an opinion about most things, especially things relative to your family relationships. And so when a family member comes, the first thing your mind is doing is analyzing and judging. And let me say this, this is a part, and this is not an excuse, this is a reality. I'm letting you know what it is, what the reality is, so that you can begin to develop strategies to overcome it. The reality is, as human beings, as part of our survival, we have to learn to judge. We have to make split decisions all day, every day, and to be able to judge. That's for survival. And you can imagine, as we were hunter gatherers, etc., you had to judge everything. And then as war was introduced and stuff, you got to consider whether this person is walking to you to hand you the stick or to beat you with the stick. You don't know. So you got to make split second judgments. And that translates over into the family relationship as well. It's kind of something that has been passed from generation to generation. We're kind of stuck with it. That tendency to be judgmental, because it is important to be judgmental just from a survival perspective. But yet it's not productive to be judgmental from a family perspective. Does anybody hear what I'm talking about? Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, that makes
It does.
perfect sense.
Perfect sense. You definitely don't want to be in a judgmental space when someone is speaking to you, because you're almost they're not going to be vulnerable with you anymore. So, yeah. So how do you pick it? How do you choose? Yeah. I don't even know how to respond to that.
You know, one of the things, and I'm going to switch back to what we were saying just a second ago and bring it all together. One of the things when you look at the life of Christ, his confidence in his Father was what on borderline what we would call or what we would judge as being arrogant and cocky. I know my Father always hears me. You know, to say something like that, I know I don't have to worry about about anything. My Father will never leave me. I'm never alone. I always do the will of my Father. There was this confidence. Like I said, in our world, we might even consider if he was a member of our church, we would consider him cocky and arrogant because we put a high value on false humility. You can be arrogant in your heart, you're just not supposed to say it. Go figure. But anyway, but he had this confidence, and it was generated and encouraged by his relationship with the Father and their communication. I just threw that out into the atmosphere. Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, that means to build that level of confidence, that means you have to build that level of trust. So, I mean, that means he was so faithful, and that built such a level of trust. That's the only way you can get to that level of arrogance, is say, I know this person will do this. I know this person will never fail. I know, but that's because they prove themselves time and time again, which built trust.
My wife and I have listened to some of these radio pranks recently. And it's always amazing how quickly a wife or a husband will just believe what a stranger calls and tells them. Your wife has been coming to my house every day. Your wife's name, basic information. Your wife's name is this, and she drives this type of car. Yeah, she's been coming to see me every day. And you just see the husbands lose it. They come unglued because they really believe that it's happening. And you just say to yourself, where's that confidence, bro? I know I don't know where you got all this information from, but I know for a fact that my wife has not been fooling around with you. So you're going to need to call somebody else with this, because I know that my wife has it. Oh, I'm going to tell you, as once he did, he said she got a tattoo and mentioned where the tattoo and stuff was. Yeah, you know all of that. But I can tell you this much, you weren't with her. I don't know where you saw her tattoo. I don't know who told you about it, but I'm confident that you weren't with her. And, imagine that kind of confidence in our relationships. And I think one of the places where that happens, that confidence, is when we establish it in little small steps, i.e., when our family members tell us things that are vulnerable, we don't throw it back in their face. And now I'm preaching to myself. I'm not preaching to anybody who's watching this. I'm preaching to me. Where we don't throw it back in their face during times of disagreement or disappointment, where we are able to hold their secrets in confidence, where we don't judge them or try. And one of the areas of judging is giving over advising. When they come to you with their issues, and then you jump right into advising and solving mode. By not doing those things, this builds that confidence that this person is invested in me. This person is here for me. This is my ride or die. I'm going to move on to the next thing, unless somebody else has something they want to share. And I want to say, Mitchie, Denise, what would you consider a significant aspect of Jesus's and his Father's communication with each other? What would you consider a significant aspect as you look at the way they communicated? What would you consider a significant aspect of Jesus's and his Father's communication with each other? I'm going to start with you this time, Mitchie. Yes. Since everybody's been throwing my baby under the bus.
But she's so intelligent. We just love to hear her answers.
She's very intelligent. And I ask those who are viewing, tell us, what do you consider to be the most significant aspect of Jesus and his communication with his Father? Go ahead, Mitchie.
I don't know. I haven't had time to really reflect. I always use Denise's time while she's speaking to reflect while she's talking. So this is a little hard. I don't know. I can't really, I don't know that I can put one specific thing that he's always, that he could go to him at any time about anything. because he had, in your last chapter, many different prayers, different types of prayers.
Yeah.
And he could go it for any reason, and he knew his Father was there. I guess the confidence. I guess that confidence in the relationship of knowing that person is there that you can depend and trust, or just know that person is listening.
To know that Jesus knew the Father was listening. Wow, that's beautiful. Denise, what would you consider to be one of the most important aspects? And again, if you're watching this, just put it in the comments. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are as well. Put it in the comment section, what you consider to be the most significant aspect of Jesus's and his Father's communication with each other. Denise?
I think what Chi-Chi said was spot on. And in addition to that, I would say, oh man, I just had it. Confidence, and I had something else, but it was just basically knowing that the connection, the connectedness, knowing that to see me is to see him. You know what I mean? And so other people see it in you. Like, man, sometimes people, when they spend time with me, I'm not as outgoing as you are, but when people spend time with me, they're like, you and Robert are not that different after all. Oh my gosh, I always thought, you were the whatever other one or whatever.
The calm one,
right. You
the
love
less
to tease
joking
people
one.
too.
Yeah.
Right. And what people don't know, like you said before, is that I'm worse than you when it comes to my kids. If people mess with my children. So, to see me is to see you is to see me. And it's that intimacy, that connection, and the confidence that the connection brings.
Onisha says, and I don't know, I'm probably butchering this name, I'm so sorry. Onisha says, Jesus showed respect when speaking to his Father, and he trusted that he listened. There was a level of respect, and I like that there was a level of respect that Jesus showed with his Father when the two of them communicated. And I think that sometimes that's missing. Even when you look at a lot of people's posts on Facebook, there's a certain amount of disdain for dissent, disdain for disagreement. And it's not just a disdain for the thought, but a disdain for the person. We've really become a very, hostile. This cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, has really developed a lot of hostility. And we need to learn to get back to this place. One thing I really appreciate about the Nation of Islam, and I'm sure that they still do this, but when I was a young man growing up in Washington, D.C., the brothers from the Nation, they would always refer to you as sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. I'm talking about you could be 5 years old, and they would talk to you. The way that they spoke to you was always so respectful. I mean, you could be the homeless man on the street. You could be, the pariah of the community, but they talk to you with respect. And I think that's a very valid point. Thank you so much for sharing that. You could see that there was just a high level, no matter what the Father did, there was just this high level of admiration and respect that Jesus had for him. Anyone else?
I like that. So let me ask you, with the respect, going back to listening, we talk about how did Jesus listen to his Father and how did his Father listen to him? How did they demonstrate that? Or how was that demonstrated?
So several things that the book brings out. The book brings out the fact that the Father would, when Jesus would speak, the Father would verbally affirm him. One time during when Jesus was at the temple, his Father said to them, I have glorified your name, and I've glorified you, and I will glorify you again. And, just that, again, that confidence. When they were up on the Mount of Transfiguration, the Father thunders and says, this is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Like you can trust what he's saying. And you can just imagine if you hear someone speaking through thunder telling you, listen to him. People work their entire life to be recognized, actors, that is, entertainers work their entire life to be recognized by the Motion Picture Association and to receive an Oscar for Best Actor or Best Supporting Actor. They work their whole life to receive that kind of recognition. And the Father was so kind in giving that type of recognition to Jesus. I think that that's very profound. He recognized Jesus. Anyone else want to share on that thought? And if you're watching this, put your thoughts in the comments section. I'm going to move as we're getting closer to our close. I'm going to move and just ask this right here. What is the biggest takeaway? And again, I want to hear from you in the comment section as well. What is your biggest takeaway from how Jesus communicated with others? We talked about how he communicated with the Father, but what is your biggest takeaway from how Jesus communicated with others?
Oh,
go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not really sure. I'm just going off of my own understanding of how he spoke and in his teachings. Yeah. I actually like the way he spoke in parables. Because when someone would ask a question, instead of putting it back on them, which makes you a lot of times get uncomfortable, and to speak in such a way in a parable, it made you think about what he was saying rather than feeling criticized or judged. So I really like that, the how he spoke in parables to people. I think I would feel, I don't know, that would make me feel good. I could really listen.
And you know what the genius of that was, Chi-Chi, and I want to hear back from you. The genius of that was he used nature, and some people say, well, it's not relevant, but nature is the one thing that goes across every generation. Had he used examples and analogies from the military or from, modern day technology, it wouldn't have resonated with us. But you can actually see how, even in 2021, you can look at a mustard seed and see how it works. In 2021, you can go to a farm and you can see where some of the seeds were plucked up by birds, where some of the seeds fell among the thorns, where some of the seeds fell on stony ground, and where the other seeds actually produced a harvest. You can actually see this. All of those illustrations are still relevant because the world continues as it has. When he talks about the birds and he talks about the other animals and things, the sheep and whatnot, we still have shepherds. Sheep are still here. That's how we get our wool and whatnot.
It's almost like he was, instead of pointing the finger back at you, it was saying, think about this and can just, think more, rather than saying like, well, you should be doing this. It was just an opportunity to provide you to think deeper and to also reflect on his words, what was wanted, and where you stood and where you were. I don't know. I don't really like that.
He encouraged. So when you think about the way he communicated with others, he encouraged people to think.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
Talking about thinking, I never thought about that. That's a very powerful observation. Again, please put your comments in the chat section so we can hear what you're thinking as well as you're watching this. Denise, as you look at how Jesus communicated with others, what is your biggest takeaway? Or what stands out to you the most about the way Jesus not communicated with his Father, but the way he communicated with others?
My biggest takeaway is maturity, actually. Honing that skill and remaining mature, no matter where I am and who I'm communicating with. Just always intentionally and with a level of maturity.
I think about it, and I want to kind of piggyback off of what you just said, or at least rather tag along with what you just said. And that is, the thing that sticks up to me is about the honesty of Jesus' communication. He never flattered anyone. Even people who were on his team, he did not try to win them with feigned praise. He was just an honest person, but he wasn't hurtful. He didn't try to hurt people, even those who came to attack him.
Right.
And sometimes we take the way that Jesus communicated and we translate it into our own language. I often think about when Jesus was preaching a sermon one day, and a guy stands up in the middle of his sermon on the Holy Spirit and says, "Hey, Jesus, I want you to do me a favor. Tell my brother to give me half of the inheritance." And Jesus says, man, who made me a judge and a ruler over you? And I've always seen that in a very hostile tone. I'd be very interested in actually knowing how Jesus said that, because if you look at the rest of it, did he say it in a way to embarrass the man? And I know he didn't. Did he say it in a way to crush the man, to put the man? Because we would have said it, and everybody would have applauded because we'd have got the man told. We put him in his place. But knowing all that the Bible shares with us about who Christ was, that couldn't have been. Even when he said, but he was honest. I'm not here to figure out who's supposed to get what inheritance from their daddy. That's not what I think that's a very honest, even with the rich young ruler. A lot of us, man, we would have danced all around it and tried to find ways to appease him. He just said, you're going to have to sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me. I mean, just that whole concept of that honest communication just really sticks out in my mind.
Right.
Anyone else want to share? I haven't heard from my daughter, Samantha. I thought she was there with you.
Oh, she's pregnant, so she goes in and out. So I walked away, and I'm in the room by myself.
Boy, she's putting them out, ain't she?
That's right.
As we start to come to the close, we've spent the last 10 weeks exploring this book, and the book that we're talking about is Seasoned with Grace, God's Recipe for Healthy Family Communication. We spent the last 10 weeks exploring this book. We have discussed the family in general, the African-American family in particular. We've also explored in-depth healthy family communication. Looking at all the stuff that we've gone through the book and coming to the end of our discussion, I want to ask you, what are your final thoughts? What would you share? And you don't have to just be one thing. We can go back and forth. So you may have several things you want to share. But what is something or some things you want to share? Your final thoughts.
My final thought would be that always be communicating with people. It helps you to be connected to people, especially those who are in your family. It helps you to grow, and it helps them to grow. Wow. I would also say be intentional with the communication. So always be communicating and always be intentional about that communication. Be selfless in our communication, in that we're not intentional hurting people, but we're intentionally communicating in an authentic way so that we are known.
I make myself known so that I might be known. Wow. What's something that jumps out at you? What as we look at this whole book, what is something you're thinking about, Mitchie?
I think Denise kind of summed it up. I really like when she said, be intentional in your communication, intentional and not without hurting. And I just thinking about how you communicate with the Father and how the Father communicates with you, and trying to do the same with others and think about others in that same way. Like, how would you want to be, respected or communicated with? So I don't know. That book was awesome. I enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it. And so to sum it up in one,
not sentence, but just in one thought, whatever your thoughts are.
Really quickly like that. It's I don't know. I would have to think about that, but I definitely enjoyed reading it, and I learned a lot. And I think also too, what made me want to do is with family. I think I communicate better with people outside of my family than I do with my own family. And it actually made me want to, when I said intentional, be more intentional with family members that I'm close to, that I may have blocked myself off from and kept it very surface. And to know that I can, although they may not be able to go any deeper, that shouldn't stop me or hinder me from my level of communication with them. So I think that's something that after reading this, it made me want to work on.
Very powerful.
That's awesome. This was a tiny power packed book. Mighty but tiny, or tiny but mighty.
I agree.
Well, thank you.
I can't wait for the next one.
Me too.
I can't wait to finish writing the next one. So pray for me. One of the things that jumped out at me, and one of the I guess the impetus for me writing this book is something I just found out about a week ago. And that is that during slavery, the life expectancy of a slave was 21 years. And I thought about that, and it made me think because, as many of you already know, my grandfather's grandfather was a slave. So I don't have to go back 20 generations to end up on a plantation. I go back 3 generations on either my mother or father's side, and I bump into a slave.
And not to interrupt you,
Go ahead.
but this is not a situation where it's an oral tradition that's passed down. This is your grandfather sitting down, giving memories about, I remember my grandfather, and he said.
Yeah. So you're talking about direct connection
Right.
with slaves. So I'm touching someone who touched a slave. That's how close the thing is. I have touched someone who has touched a slave. And what I think about is not just life expectancy, but I think about wealth, education, family health and functioning, all those things. As you rip children from their parents, as as a husband, you have to sit outside of the cabin when the master decides to come down and rape your wife. All those different indignities, and kind of like wrapping your mind around what our community needs to do. One of the things that I was encouraged by, I watched a video, and Roland Martin, I was actually disgusted with how Roland Martin handled this young man. But Roland Martin was interviewing this young man from South Carolina. I'm sorry, from Albany, Georgia. My apologies. From Albany, Georgia, a young man named King Randall. And King Randall, at 21 years old, made a very good point. He said, if we're really going to strengthen the Black community, I'm paraphrasing, we're going to have to all hit it from a different facet. Some people are going to have to deal with voting rights. Some people are going to have to deal with, public safety and policing reform. Some people are going to have to deal with education. Some people are going to have to deal with finances, because, we've been hit so hard that it really is going to take the best minds to figure out how we build up our community educationally, how we build back our communities economically, how do we build our communities from a family perspective. And what jumped out at me as I look at this book, especially considering that it was, written through the lens of the Black family, is that no matter where you believe is the first place that we need to strengthen in the Black community, it can't be done unless we strengthen family communication. We can't grow economically unless we learn to communicate and to develop strategies, economic strategies. We can't grow from family perspective unless families communicate. We can't grow educationally unless everything kind of hinges on healthy communication. And that's as I've wrote the book, as I've had a chance to review the book, that has really stood out to me, that this is the kind of the foundation for how everything else that we need is built upon as a Black community.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
So when you brought up slavery and African American community, it brought a conversation that my husband and I have very often. And one thing that we had to learn was like the way that we do things and communicate has been learned behaviors.
It is.
Down through generations, and very unhealthy behaviors. And even having the conversation of a lot of these behaviors came from slavery. Yeah. And when you couldn't speak and you couldn't speak up, so you had to train your children not to speak up. And so now we hear, well, why are you doing all this, letting your child do all this talking? They don't even realize that's not even normal behavior. That's something where we weren't allowed to do it. And so one thing that my husband and I talk about often is that I don't know if it's going to bite us in the butt later. I'm not sure. But one thing we talk about is that we are very, very intentional. I'm going to use Denise's word, intentional with trying to break those habits with our son and allowing him to maybe speak up or to or be able to communicate with him respectfully, communicating back and forth respectfully in a way that we weren't allowed to, and trying
It's
to
8 o'clock.
break those curses and those, oh, well, I want to say curses, but those inherited learned behaviors.
Yeah.
So those behaviors, yeah, a lot of things we think we're doing, and that's great, and how we speak to each other, that's been passed down, and it's not a positive one. And so that's where I thought about in your book. That's something that we focus on and we're very intentional about.
Well, thank you. Thank you. One of the things as we close, the book again is Seasoned with Grace, God's Recipe for Healthy Family Communication. You can grab a copy both in print as well as digital from Amazon, or you can get a digital copy from Google Books or Apple Books. You know, one of the things that the book brings out early on is that if you destroy the family, you can destroy the community, and you can actually destroy the entire race of people. But guess what? If you strengthen the family, then you can strengthen the community, which means you will strengthen the entire race of people. And we're at a place now where we want to identify what are the things that were pre-programmed as a result of slavery, things that we were pre-programmed with as a result of slavery, as a result of segregation and Jim Crow and all of the other inhumanities and injustices that were placed upon us. But we don't want to stay there. We now want to say we're going to strategize to move forward. And I want to encourage you and every family who's watching this. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mitchie, and thank you for joining us, Denise. So glad that you were part of this conversation for these last several weeks, and each of you who have tuned in for these last several weeks to be a part of this discussion and experience. Let's make sure that we do our part to strengthen our family and to unbox all the power and the potential of healthy family relationships. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Until then, have a great evening.
Seasoned with Grace Unboxed also provides healthy relationship training and leadership development for businesses, churches, and community organizations. For a free consultation to discuss your team's needs, please contact us at our website at swg-unboxed.org. That's swg-unboxed.org.